This documentary is an attempt to tell the life of an iconic Irish hero, a patriot, a freedom fighter, but more importantly a brother, a son, a friend and a comrade. On the 2nd of August 1981 at 7:15, the life of Kieran Doherty ended, having spent 73 days on hunger strike, the second hunger strike that he had undertaken in a very short period. A 26-year-old from Andersonstown. Wherever Irish people gather, Kieran Doherty and the other hunger strikers that give their lives in the cause of Irish freedom is known. But perhaps what isn't known is who was Kieran Doherty. What was his background? What did he like? What did he not like? What did he do? What was he good at? And I'm joined this afternoon with Terry and Michael, two brothers, who hopefully will be able to tell us some of that background. We have deliberately chose the PD club in Andersonstown, a club that is synonymous with the Doherty family, to try and set the scene of how a young man from this community finds himself in the hellhole of Lonkeys. So both of you, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
And I know that you have done, both of you have done numerous interviews, and you've travelled the country both during the hunger strike and after the hunger strike, talking about the injustice that was done to the prisoners. But as a young man and as a brother, tell us a bit about Kieran. Was he older than you, younger than you, mischievous? Terry, let's start with Terry first.
Okay. Kieran was my younger brother. Me and him shared a room in the house, as Michael did for quite a while. As Michael got older, he moved to his grandparents' house. But me and Kieran shared a room, and with being two brothers, sometimes that didn't go well. Mm-hmm. We always had a wee bits of conflict, but we got on fairly well, you know. Played the normal games, football, hurling in the field, chases, rounders, all the games you played when you were kids, you know. He was a good brother. There was, he was just a nice guy. He was just your brother, you know, like any other brothers. You always had that bit of, you had fun, and then you had your arguments and stuff like that there. But in general, we got on well.
Michael, you were the older brother.
Yes, that's right.
Were you the sensible one?
Yes, I had to break them up fighting. Kieran was the third brother, but then I had the two sisters on that, and Brenton came later. I was the eldest, but the three brothers were very close together. We were a year apart. I was born 53, Terry 54, and Kieran 55.
Was he a hard young man to control in the house, or was he well-mannered or bad-mannered?
No, he was. I would say Kieran was well-mannered, and Terry was more of a mischievous one, mischievous one. But sometimes when they had a wee bit of a row, I helped sort it out a wee bit, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but Kieran, he had his childhood was a happy childhood. Our house was at the top of Comeda Field there, and the big field on the slope we used to play. Terry, Kieran, and sisters we played football, hurling, camogie, all different things around us on the Comeda Green there. So I did, and I would remember then when we were younger. Terry will probably remember this too. My daddy my daddy worked for Limerick, Trinidad at the time of Taylor, but he had a company car, a Ford Anglia estate, and we would have piled into the car on a good Saturday or Sunday. Mummy made the sandwiches and biscuit tin, and we would have headed to Tralla Beach, where we spent the whole day at Tralla Beach playing Terry football, swimming. And still remember Kieran would never left the ball out of his hand. He always wanted to play football. But my daddy would have, because he was a floor tailor and used a blow lamp, he used to heat the water and soup with a blow lamp.
Let me ask, Terry. I know the journey, the Doherty journey. You know, you were in jail, and Michael was in jail, and I know your family has been kind of way steeped in Republican history, and I know that coming from this part of Belfast when the conflict broke out, like many families, you were just absorbed in the whole thing. Did you ever, in your childhood growing up, did you ever kind of, leaving aside the hunger strike, did you ever, was it foreseen that you would all, the three out of your family would end up in jail? Or was that something that it just kind of circumstances propelled you?
That was something out of our control at the start. It was circumstances that came around and we were drawn into it, as hundreds of people were at that time. But our life growing up was just a normal family life, as Michael says. Weekends away to Torella Beach, playing football in the field, playing rally-o, over chalky, jumping the river, falling in the river, trying to get clean before getting home, before your ma gets out, look at your good shoes. The typical stuff that kids do. You know, me and Kieran having a disagreement in the field over football, having a dig. Mrs. Dockery, they're at it again, and you know, this sort of type of parts that we were growing up in younger life were just normal blurs, you know, and we got on like that. But as time went on, the troubles broke out, and I remember very well, it was 1969. I was working on the Old Park Road, a place in the Deer Park, and I had to travel across town, cycle down the falls, over Agnes Street, up Manor Street, and up on to the Old Park. And I remember the day cycling down, and the place was in turmoil. The whole place was on fire, and I couldn't get to work. I had to turn back, and this was the start.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember the Brits coming in. I remember sitting on back of their jeeps, as Kieran did, and took us a jaunt around on the back tailgate of the jeep, sitting our legs dangling on, letting us look through the sights
Of the
rifles. Little did you know, 6 weeks later, things would have blew up the way they did.
And those same rifles would be pointed at your community?
Yes, them same rifles would have been pointed, yeah.
Michael has,
Yes.
has mentioned, and you have mentioned your mother, and I had the privilege of knowing both your mother and your father. And your mother, for anyone who had never had that privilege of meeting her, was a very gentle woman. She was a very mild-mannered woman. So in the middle of Andersonstown, you have a family growing up, very respectable family. You have, all of a sudden, or what appears to be all of a sudden, the regular raids to the family home. And the Dockertys were singled out, not least of all because of you two, but also because of Kieran at a very early age. Can you remember the early raids in the home? Can you remember that period when the British Army raided the house?
Yeah. Well, at that time, I had moved over to my granddad's because my granny had a bad heart and granddad taxied, so I sort of was there. That's how I started staying there to look after her at night and stuff. But I had a couple of raids in Bing Drive, and I remember the Brits coming in, and first thing I remember was the door coming off the hinges, and they pulled me out of bed and into the Saracen. And my granda said he would go with me down to the barracks and stuff. So that was one of the raids. But I wasn't in a Cometa Drive.
What age were you then?
17.
And your mommy's side, can you remember the raids in your mommy's side?
Yeah, there was quite a few. One, again, I was arrested 2 or 3 times, brought to Castlereagh. Kieran, also Castlereagh. I remember them lifting floorboards. My dad saying, go with that Brit. They were searching different parts of the house. So my dad was saying, more or less, go and keep an eye on in case they planted stuff like that there, just walk around. But most times when the Brits came, they held you in the living room. You weren't allowed to move. At one stage, they left the place, and looking back on it now, it was a funny thing that happened. Mum went up to bed after the raid. We were tidying around the house, and the next thing the scene came in. They left the floorboards up, and at that time they'd only lino on the floors. So when my mum went into the bedroom, she fell through the floor, and her leg came down into the living room. This is, okay, it was serious at the time, but when you look back, you can laugh at these 3 things, but yes,
Your mother didn't come from this part of the world. She didn't come from the Andersonstown area.
No.
How did she adjust, to this ongoing and constant harassment of her family, who she loved to bits, loved dearly? Like, did she manage well? Was she frightened? Was she frightened for you? Was it?
Well, she never showed that she was frightened. But I'm sure, like any parent, when we went out during the day, going to work, you could have been assassinated. The Brits could arrest you at any stage. You could be battened. Parents will worry, but she didn't show it to us. No, she was a lovely mum. Dinners on the table every night, 6 o'clock, and for your dinner. You know what I mean? And there was no Sunday dinner. It was just we were just a family. We got on like a family. Even though the troubles were on, family, we got on with it. Family life was still family life. No, there wasn't any changes. Dinner was still at 6 o'clock. Doesn't matter if the Brits were going to come in later on that night, or there was a shooting down the street, or there was something going on, ratting. You knew that dinner was ready at 6, so you went home.
When I look around photographs of Kieran, and I'm sure these are all good looking. I'm sure all these were good looking. I think one of the things that strikes you about Kieran is he almost looks like a rock star. He looks like a rock star or a folk star in the mid 60s, early 70s. That long hair and that dress. What they used to say in Belfast, was he fond of himself? Did he know he was good looking?
I don't know. That's, to be honest with you, he looked after himself. He had this thing when he was head, he always liked to push his hair back, and it was like he'd done this. It was like a habit. Checked himself out. Of course, going out at night. Once we came to the ages of coming to a bar and having a drink, certainly he dolled himself up, and there was girls chasing him. You know what I mean? He would have been one of them ones where he wouldn't have to do too much chasing.
Well, he would have wore as the jeans well pressed, and the Ben Sherman shirt, and the V-neck jumper, and the nice jacket, and the Oxford shoes, highly polished. So I remember that's when he was going out, of course. When he was maybe operating, he was wearing different gear.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
I would imagine.
I think my mummy, they used to take us every Sunday to Mass. We never missed Sunday to Mass. But as the tournament came in, and seen 69, and raiding the house, my mummy supported. She seen the injustice and what the British were up to, and she supported Kieran, Terence, and myself and the family, and she got more what you call Republican then. So that's how she got into that. And I think Kieran, one of the turning points in Kieran was he seen 69. He seen the tournament, and his second cousins were shot dead in the Lower Falls, Maura Meakin and Dorothy Maguire.
Yeah.
So I think they were turning points in Kieran's life.
The reason I'm asking you the question, and I see you smiling when I'm asking you that, is that for most people, when we talk about Kieran Doherty, sometimes we forget when he died, he was 26. He was active in Republican politics from he was 15. He had been on the run to avoid arrest for a period when he was very, 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 very young. And of course, like Michael and yourself, he was also interned. And I think it's almost beyond most people's comprehension that a man who loves life, or a boy, or a young man who loves life, would take such decisions, lightly. And that was the reason I was asking you that question. I want to return, the Dohertys as well has been renowned for being Republicans, are also renowned for their sporting ability. And before we started this interview, you were talking about cycling, and I know Michael was a keen sportsman. Was Kieran into sport? I mean, apart from fighting with you on the field?
Yes. Well, Kieran was into the Gaelic football in the early days. He played for the primary school, he played for the secondary school, and Big Brian White did midfield with him, and he says he was a tremendous fielder of a ball. He was in par with John McCarran, who was an Antrim star, and Kieran would have probably became an Antrim star. But I was started to get into cycling, but the brother riding tours, but the brothers made me go and play matches. And our pitch was on the Glen Road beside Crossing Passion School, up beside the brewery, and it was on a slope. And there was rushes in the field and blackthorn bushes round. So if you got a dunt into the hedge, you come out with thorns on you. But it was the under 16 championship matches, and I would have been doing midfield. I was 16 and under 16. Kieran was only 14, turning 14, and he was in that team, and he could hold his own against anybody. So I used to hit the ball out to Kieran and then back to me and whatever. We worked together. But then I went.
You were a double act.
I went into cycling, but he would have turned out. There's a famous photograph of his Trees' minor team off that he won a minor medal in '71, and he must have been maybe didn't want his photograph. Everybody's looking at the camera and he has his head turned like that. So he didn't want his photograph. Yes. And he did a wee bit of cycling, turns was into the cycling. But Kieran came along on an older type bike. Our bikes were handed down, like I got a new bike, handed the one down the turns to Kieran. He would have been a good cyclist too, wouldn't he, Terry? He was,
I remember we had our local club race would be at Gully's Gate, out at the far side of Lurgan, on the shores of Loch Ness. There was a circuit in around there, and there was a championship race one day. Kieran himself wasn't well for the week coming up this, but he wanted to ride this race, and he rode the race. He wanted to win it, but my dad said to him, "You're not well, you're not riding the race." But he did ride the race, and he was very determined to ride the race, and he finished third on the race. And it showed you some of his determination, you know, that it was always there. You know, there was wee silly things he'd done, and then looking back, we used to go to Falls Bass for a swim on a Saturday morning. Everybody back in the days, up down to Falls Bass, and round to Candy's Bakery afterwards for the wee buns, the crushed buns, the bag of crushed buns you got for 2p or something, whatever it was back in the time. But I remember us learning to swim and just starting off, and Kieran this time says, "I'm going to do 20 lengths." He never swam 20 lengths before, you know, and we were going, right, whatever. So off he went then. He done it, he nearly drowned, but he was determined to finish these 20 lengths, and he did. And that's part of the genes in him, that, you know, he was always determined that if he started something, he would finish it, you know.
I mentioned your mother, and I hope I done her justice. And also a friend of mine, as well as someone I knew, was your father. And we're in the PD club, a club that your father was synonymous with. And if all the money that was owed to him was ever paid to him, the Dockerys would be the richest family in Belfast, because if a club was supposed to make money, nobody told Alfie, because he gave everybody strap. But if you were saying, you know, if you were kind of trying to judge who Kieran was like, I know physically you had your father's size, had he your father's personality?
No, I don't think he had. I don't think he had my father's personality. He had two. I think he had two. Well, he was a very determined person and committed person, and he had his personality. It would change. He had his group of friends, and he enjoyed a wee drink, bottles of Guinness, and had a bit of crack for his friends, and that. But when then he was involved on an operation or in a house, one of his colleagues told me, I said, how would you describe Kieran? And said he was fearless, fearless, and his personality would change when he went into a house. He said he was so committed, he was frightening, and so precise, and want to plan and everybody would want to operate with Kieran, because I knew he would have backed them up, whatever was going on.
You were going to say, and I'm going to ask you the same question about his personality.
Well, I would agree with Michael about that. You know, when he had to be in his bonnet, he was very focused and you wouldn't have shifted him. You know, whatever he was doing, he was focused, and he had seen it through. And that was Brent, or that was Kieran. But as you said about my father, no, definitely, Kieran had his own ways, you know, and I don't know where that came from, you know. I'm very forgiving and very, you know, my personality wouldn't be anywhere near Kieran's personality. He was a nice guy.
Yeah.
He would treat you well, you know. But if you had to say something, he'd be straightforward and say it. He wouldn't hide behind doors. That's the type of guy he was, you know. He would call you out right away, you know, and that would be Kieran, you know.
I want to move you on to that period of internment. I know you're both interned. And Kieran was one of the last internees to be released. Despite his early age, he was one of the last internees to be released. Was there any sense, when internment ended, was there any sense that his Republican activities, that he had done his bit, you know, he didn't need to do any more, that he needed to get on with his life? Or was it always going to be the case, in your opinions?
Yes.
Was it always going to be the case
yeah.
that he was going to throw himself back into the struggle?
No,
Yes.
it was always going to be the case that he was going to go straight back. I spoke to somebody and he reported back within days. And I wasn't turned at the same time. I was case 5, Kieran was case 4, and I would have went over and met him, and he was committed. He says, I'm going straight back for Irish freedom. I'm going to continue the fight. It was just a wee funny bit that thing had happened.
Oh, that's an insight.
And I was in cage 5 and a tunnel was found, so we didn't get any food parcels for a week. And Kieran was in cage 4, I was in cage 5. I could see Kieran through the fence at night. So he got a food parcel together in a bag with a weight in it, and he tried to throw it from cage 4 to cage 5. And it hit the electric wires and put the power out in the camp. So the boys didn't get any food, didn't get any tea or anything that night. They would have killed me. So
And there was no light.
No, it's
The reason I'm asking you that question is that it would have been quite understandable that at that age, having been interned, having been on the run, having been an active service volunteer, that when you get out of jail, that you set about getting a life for yourself. But you've explained where Kieran's head was. Can I ask you, and I mentioned earlier on the harassment of the family, and the Doherty family were one of those families that were selected in Andersonstown for the regular raids. After internment, did these raids, did they intensify, or did they level off? Or, you know, how were the family treated, broadly speaking, by the British Army in the area?
well, you still got your normal stops. They knew who you were, especially the Green Jackets. The Green Jackets seemed to target our house more than any other regiment. I don't know if that's because of the timing of Kieran being involved and us, that early stages of troubles. I mean, even myself walking down the street, you heard a whistle and it'd be Major Lloyd calling you back to search you. You know, you had to go to him, you know what I mean? He stood, called you back. The house, as I said, that was the Green Jackets who lifted the floorboards in the house. They also, you know, the comments they made in and around the house, you know, to your mother and stuff, you know, degrading type of comments, trying to wind the father up and stuff like this here. Just the general, they were just out to cause a bit of hassle in the house, trying to cause a reaction, you know, to maybe make arrests. Kieran, 9 times out of 10, Kieran wasn't there. You know what I mean?
Because he was on the run.
Because he was on the run, you know. But the houses were still being raided. I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many times they were raided, but it was that over a period of a year, it could have been 10 times. 10.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Kieran, he got out at November 8, 75, and he was arrested in August 76. So I think then the raids did ease off now because they knew he was on the run, they knew he wasn't staying there. So they did ease off a bit because of that. Yeah, and he was involved in many operations. And the famous one is when Maria Farrell was caught and Sean McDermott was killed. Kieran was there and got away. Yes.
In fact, there's a very famous photograph of Kieran while he's on the run at the
Glen Owen.
Yes.
Looking into the funeral. Can I ask you, shortly after that period of back on remand, prolonged remand in the Crum, he finds himself in the blocks, and immediately he's on protest. How difficult was that for your mother and father? How anxious do you think that period? And I know they weren't the only family, but Kieran seemed to have been singled out consistently for beatings by the Screws, maybe because of his determination. So, can you remember, were there conversations in the house where people, was your mother and father worried, frightened?
Well, Kieran put himself forward for some of the beatings.
Explain that then, what you mean.
Right. One time when he was on remand in the Crum, he was coming through the tunnel, and there was a young guy. He was getting hassled by the Screws, and Kieran stepped in to protect him. The Screws then attacked Kieran. Kieran took the beating for the young lad and saved him getting a more vicious beating than he did. And that's what Kieran did that. Even a couple of times in the case itself, he had a couple of real bad beatings where, I mean, he should have been hospitalised and never was. You know, he was brutalised, as were all the rest of the boys in the case. And again, if they were going out to the washrooms with their towels on, the degrading part of that, you know, the Screws making fun of him, laughing at them, and stuff like this. Maybe some young lad getting hassled, Kieran would have stepped in, and he took quite a few beatings and helping his comrades, you know.
This might surprise you. I spoke to someone while we were getting ready to do this conversation, or to have this conversation. Someone who'd been in jail in the blocks with Kieran. And he said that he never ever seen Kieran, either at Mass or just by coincidence seen Kieran in the blocks, that he didn't have a cut, a black eye, or a bruise around his face of some description. And he said it was Screws had made it their business to single him out. I mean, were you aware of that at the time?
Yes, well, yes. Well, he would try, in visits with Mummy and Father, he would try to hide any of the torture and injustice he was receiving, and he would just have an ordinary visit. He'd say he's doing okay. But from the very start, Kieran wouldn't conform with prisoners. He wouldn't, with prison warders, Screws. He wouldn't speak to them. They would have to drag him out of the cell. The mirror searches, they would take 6 or 8 of them to fight him. And when he did get a visit, when they say time up, he wouldn't go. So every day of every year, he fought them. It was like what Bobby Sands says, I fought a monster today. But it comes back every day with his devils. Kieran fought them every day of his life there, and Kieran was a big frame, 6 foot, well built, so the warders would have singled them out. But what would they have done? If they were doing a wing shift where they dragged them all out, they'd hit Kieran first, so he had to take him by surprise, or take him first after lunch, or afterwards. And then they would come in and get him.
Can I move you on just? Although Kieran died on the 81 hunger strike, he was also on the 1980 hunger strike, as you obviously know. How did he break, or maybe you don't know the answer to this, but how did he break the news to the family that he was going to embark on a hunger strike? Was it a surprise to you? Was it, did you see it coming?
Well, Kieran, we knew he was a very determined guy, and he was very well got within his comrades within the case. But no, how we found out was he wrote a letter home to the family, more or less saying that he was going on the hunger strike and he was looking our backings, and if we weren't prepared to back him, that he actually didn't want you weren't going to get a visit, you know what I mean? If you weren't going to stand behind him 100%, he was going to say no more visits, and he wanted people to support him, and the family did support him.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
You were going to say, Michael?
It was no surprise. He said he didn't say in the visit, but he sent a comment to say that he would have been going on a hunger strike. This is the first hunger strike.
Yeah, the 80 hunger strike.
And he said to my mother and father, would you give me your assurance? Because he didn't know how the first hunger strike was going to go. Would you give me, and the second one, would you please give me your assurance that you'll stand by my wishes? even if I lapse into a coma, please give me assurance. And my mother and father give him that assurance that they would stand by him.
And that must have been incredibly hard for your mommy and daddy. It must have been like, you just, you know, such a decision to have to make. The 1980 hunger strike ended the way we all know it ended. It ended by the British government going back on promises that they had made, even simple promises they had made. At the end of that 80 hunger strike, he certainly had been weakened by hunger strike. Did it weaken his determination?
Oh no. He was there to support his comrades. He was there. He was in hunger strike for his comrades, and not just for his comrades, for everybody. You know, he was a very determined guy. And once he went on, as I said earlier on about his wee bits in his life when he done wee things like the swimming, the cycling, the football as he was young, playing the field, younger than the old ones. He was determined to get the ball. He was determined to finish things. When he went on hunger strike, we knew he was determined and he would finish that.
Did you, and this is a hard question, and it's, all these questions are looking back on things, and time changes perceptions. Was there a point where you kind of realised that Kieran could die here? Did it reach that early on? Did it reach that point?
Me personally, you seen the people dying. I never thought it would come to Kieran. Kieran was down the line a bit. This will get sorted out.
Yeah.
He'll not die.
Yeah.
It'll be over by the time. There was wee glimmers every now and then that there may be something in talks. We were meeting up in the Green and Lodge Hotel. I don't know if it was naivety or whatever it was with me, but I thought he would have survived. I thought it would have ended. When I got closer to the time, and the days rolled on, when he wasn't going to survive.
I was heavily involved in the hunger strike, and it wasn't naivety in your case, or in my part. It was hope. You hoped that there would be no more death. You hoped that you know, it would be resolved. It could have been resolved so many times. So
Yes.
Had you a sense, Michael, that when he started the 81 hunger strike, that it might lead to his death, or in fact it would lead to his death?
Yes. Well, we hoped that it wouldn't lead to his death, but knowing Kieran, how committed, and what he said is, he sort of said after the first hunger strike, when it's called off after 53 days, and the British reneged on the commitments, he says they rubbed their noses in it. They got, after 5 years on the blanket men, in 5 years, they were on a high. They thought it was over, and then the British took them right down there to demoralise them. He says, by God, they're not going to do that again to me. I am not going to give up unless it's set in the 5 demands are in concrete, and it's not just the 5 demands. They're trying to break the Republican movement. So he says, it's either the 5 demands or I am going to die.
We talked about hope just there, both of us. We all talked about the aspect of hope that came into wishing that a resolution could have been found. The election in Manor and South Tyrone was one of those periods where the British government, and in fact the government in the South, could have ended the strike by simple actions. When Kieran got elected, was that, first of all, did you expect him to get elected?
Well, I don't think anybody did. You know, and it was at the tremendous boost to republicanism that people supported him, and we ourselves all travelled down to Monaghan and then counties to help with the elections. And yes, we thought the Irish government, with him being a TD, would have stepped in somewhere along the line. My mother travelled down to Leinster House to speak to the government at the time, but to no avail. She was made set outside for a time, you know, instead of bringing her in, you know. And my mother was a family woman. She never had that, you know. She wasn't one for travelling. She'd done this on her own too, you know what I mean. She people drove her to these places, and she got down and she spoke and she spoke very well.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
and you know,
Yeah.
for you know, sorry, I'm just getting a wee bit.
Well, let me ask Michael
The same question.
Yeah.
Well, when Kieran, the Stud 9 of hunger strikers and political prisoners in the south, and we travelled up and down into towns, and my wife Betty,
Yeah.
Betty would actually spoke at in some of the town markets and stuff. The people, that's when we first met Kieran O'Keelan, Director of Elections, and Charlie Boylan, he was an election agent. And I remember Queeving organising his troops, and no stone was left unturned. People of Monaghan Cavan worked night and day from. It took Kieran days, their heart,
Absolutely.
their heart. And Kieran actually afterwards says he took them to his heart, and he was overwhelmed by their support. They said it would maybe get 4,000 votes. You get 9,123 votes. And I remember standing outside Cavan Courthouse, and we were euphoric. It was fantastic. And then when I went into Kieran, I says, Kieran, your TD, everybody says they can't let him die. And Kieran says, Michael, I would put no trust in them because of the way they're treating our prisoners in Port Leash, and that some of them were on hunger strike as well. He says, so don't raise your hopes too. But he was sensible. He says, don't raise your hopes too much.
You mentioned your mother there, and on occasions, I have to say everybody should refer to their mother or their wife or their sisters as ladies. But your mother was a lady in every sense of the word. To watch her been treated so badly, both by sections of the establishment and also by sections of the church, it must have been very difficult for the family.
Well, it was when she went to Leinster at that time, for knowing that her son was down on hunger strike, and for the government at the time to sit and just let her, you know, sit there for hours in the end before they actually spoke to her and stuff, and it is hurting. You know, I remember my mum being in the house, and I was very close to my mum,
Yeah.
and you know, to see her in stress like that back in them days, you know, worrying about Kieran and stuff like that there, it was hard.
Michael, you mentioned that during the election campaign in Cavan and Monaghan, that you had travelled down to work in the election to help get Kieran elected and all of that.
Yeah.
Your mother also was part of a campaign to influence people to support the hunger strike. Was that a difficult period for you?
Yes, my mother, it was heartbreaking for my mother and for us too, but it was a bigger pressure for my mummy because of her son. It was a son, not a brother, a son. She worked tirelessly.
Absolutely.
She worked tirelessly. She attended meetings, spoke at major rallies, and she actually was never out of the country in her life, and she went to Paris.
That's right.
She went to Paris and to speak there. So for a woman who has never even had a passport or out of the country in her life, she went there to try to save her son. And she tried everything in her power that would save her son, and she just hoped up to the last day that she could save him. So she was fighting for his life.
Can I take you, Terry, just back a wee bit and all of that? And you mentioned that determination that Kieran had.
Yeah.
In all things that he done. And as I said earlier on, I knew your father, and we've talked a lot about your mother. And your father was, for anybody who didn't know him, I don't know what size he was, but he seemed to be a giant. He was a tall man and very. What was your father's personality? Was your father a determined person as well? How was he?
Well, he was a stern person. If growing up in the house, you know, he had rules. Had all, you know, you had your chores to do, you had stuff, and through your life, you knew not to mess about with him, you know, type of thing. You had to put in place. Like,
Yeah.
again, coming he stood by my mum. My mum was brilliant, as Michael says, travelling the length and breadth. My father wouldn't have been. My father would prefer to stay in the background.
Yeah.
And back my mother, and yeah, he during the hunger strikes very determined to back Kieran, very determined to back Mum. Certainly, as a father, he wasn't a tyrant or anything like
No,
that.
no,
He was a father, and anything he done for us,
Yeah.
you know, and like he was a good man. He was a good father.
I asked you earlier on to tell me a wee bit about, and this may surprise you, but Kieran, when he was growing up, and you mentioned his sporting achievements and his sporting activity and his determination. I talked to someone again who was at school with him, and he said he was remarkably bright. He was very quick, and if he had an interest in something in school, he picked it up very quickly. Does that surprise you, or did you always know that he was a very bright individual?
Yes, well, yes. Well, I always knew he was bright, and proved that when he was able to become. He never did Irish at school, and he was fluent speaker in the blocks, and he won. They had a chess competition,
Yeah.
in the blocks.
Kieran Nugent.
And
Kieran
would have
Nugent
made the
chess
figures out of paper and scratched them on the floor and give the moves down the wing. Kieran was, he was very bright, but it maybe didn't come through till later on. He matured as intelligence and all matured. I think in the early days, now, he was very fit. He achieved GSEs at school and stuff, but he became. It matured later. And you were just saying about my daddy. In the early days, my daddy would have been a fairly strict person.
Yeah.
When we were young, growing up, we were fairly strict. We wouldn't have stepped out of line.
Well, I think you probably needed to be strict. We used to. But you were going to say that you what Michael said in terms of Kieran, that your view of him as well. If he wanted to pick something up, he would do it.
But growing up, he was no different from me doing homeworks and stuff. We sat at the kitchen table, and my dad came in and checked our homeworks, blah blah blah. You know, to me, I was never going to be an academic. You know what I mean? I knew where I was going to finish up. I was always good with my hands. Kieran also was good with his hands. He actually done a plumbing course in Felton House, and before the actual troubles, before he got involved, he was actually going to Felton House. Doing a plumbing course, and that's the line he was going into. And as Michael says, as time went on, you seen that he was an intelligent guy, you know, and he did know where he was going in life, you know.
The purpose, and we're almost finished, you'll be glad to hear, but the purpose of this conversation was to show those who watch it how are those men and women who embarked on hunger strike, how they may well have done heroic things, but they were ordinary people.
Yeah.
And the more I listen to the two of you talk about Kieran, he wasn't an ordinary person. The more I listen to you, he was someone who was very single focused, someone who had a sense of where he was going, and more importantly, had a sense of what needed to be done. When the election, the Kevin Monaghan election, and the advice that he gave you, the election doesn't change a whole lot. When that seemed to be the case, and it seemed to be the inevitability that he may well die on hunger strike, how do you deal with that? I mean, your brother's in jail, he's dying.
Yeah.
How do you, or does the situation just carry you through, or how do you deal on it?
Well, Kieran took a bad spell, about 50 odd days, so
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
we were privileged to be with him the last 16 days and nights. And me and my father would have did the nights, Terence, my mummy and sisters would during the day. So I was with him 16 nights. Me and Alfie were with him 16 nights. It was a heartbreaking emotive time, and it was a very emotive time, but we were able to get in with them to give them comfort and love. So yeah, and then as the hunger strike, as the days went on, he got weaker and weaker, and he would have sat drinking his pints of Highland spring water, and he was. What's in my memory is the striped pajamas on his bony frame, and then we had to lift him. If he was in pain or that, we'd lift him gently up on the bed, and then maybe put a pillow under the sheet to keep it off his legs. And his hands were starting to turn black, and his lips were cracked. But we wouldn't let you put Vaseline on them. And he said a few things. Those things are etched in my mind. And he said a few things. It's just a straight step forward, a step the other side. I think I'm going to beat Terence McSweeney. And he said, and he would have said, talked about Sean. He says, were you with Sean when he died? That was Sean McDermott. And he did see a photograph of a Republican Party, and he says, I like that. So that showed you the person he was.
And you done the days with your mummy, and I'm sure it was equally as difficult for you.
Yeah, well, it was. Michael, it's just to read what Michael says there. We were there for him, nursing him, giving him water when he needed water, just sitting by his bed, listening to him talking. I mean, I remember one at the very start when we came in on starting on 16 days. He picked up a bit, and he was able to actually. He was speaking very well. And the actual, Michael, you said something in Irish to him, and he corrected your grammar. You know, and this is the first time I've ever heard Kieran speaking Irish. You know, during the no voice protests, we didn't get up too often to see him over that period because my mum and dad took the visits, and his girlfriend Journey Chess. They got the privileges of going up mostly, and over that period of time, I think I only seen him about 4 or 5 times, and then them days that we spent with them, them last few days, you know, it was great. What I said was great to hold his hand. It was great. It was a privilege to be his brother.
I'm going to ask you both one last question, but before I ask you any question, I'm very mindful how difficult this conversation has been to both of you. And Betty's here. I know it's very difficult for all of you. And I want to thank you for putting yourselves, or allowing me to put yourselves through that. Outside of the hunger strike, and outside of all the stuff that happened, if you had one memory of Kieran, I'm going to ask both of you the same question. If you had one memory of him that you want to leave this interview with, what would it be, Terry? So you first.
It's determination. To me, it was always his determination. No matter what he took on, he seen it through, and as a brilliant brother, you know, just a lovely brother.
Hey, Michael?
I just feel so humbled that Kieran was my brother, the bravest brother, greatest brother ever. How could you have such a son of Ireland, give everything? But a memory outside all that, maybe playing on the green field, playing Gaelic football up the side of the mountain, and Kieran catching a high ball. Maybe that was outside the hunger strike. Maybe that's my memory of one of the last memories that stick in my mind about him.
I think that question should finish this interview, but can I just make a personal point? And we know the bravery of the hunger strikers, and we know the sacrifice that they made, and we know the torment that they went through. Quite often there's an untold story in all of this, and it is the heroism of the family, the mothers, the fathers, the brothers and sisters. Those people who knew right from wrong, and who stood by the people and by the wishes their loved ones asked them to keep. So from me to you, thank you very much.
Thank you.